Hey everybody, I have the honor of having Mr. Eric Johnson here in the studio. This is great, Eric. Thank you so much for
Thanks,
for being here.
I'm glad to be here.
It's so cool. I can't tell you how excited I am.
My pleasure.
He's playing through my deluxe here. He put a quick pedal board together.
Your pedal board
my
too,
pedal
yeah.
board. He's not playing through his stuff. He dialed up a tone real fast. I want to talk about your playing style. Growing up in Texas, you were influenced by blues a lot.
Right, yeah.
But how did this other thing happen that that you developed this style, your linear style and your chording style?
Well, I think that's a good question because I think when I started playing guitar, very quickly I got interested in learning blues guitar because I just thought the inflection of and the way the people play blues is just a beautiful way to learn to play guitar. I mean, where you know, it's just a matter of how you hit the note, how you pick the note, and how you learn to stretch the strings, and just the emotional feeling and content. As I got interested in other music, I always wanted to retain some of that technique within it. The chordal thing, I think it came from, well, originally I played piano. And so when I was really young, I took piano lessons and then later started playing guitar. So every time I pick up a guitar, I think it's almost like what was your first language you learned. And so because it was piano originally, I kind of look at the guitar as kind of like a keyboard kind of thing. And so I have a tendency to try to extract some of those voicings that you maybe would do on a piano on guitar, because to me they sound good.
Yeah.
And I like the way they sound on piano, so I kind of I try to find them and put them on guitar, you know. And sometimes they might be, I don't, you know, I mean, there's plenty of cats that have, you know, really beautiful voicings on guitar. It's definitely not a new thing, but. And I love, you know, it's almost like, you know, you get to the point where you realize there's just great magic and great beauty in every style of music and every style of playing, and so it's just a matter of wherever you put your strength or wherever you put your attention and stuff, and you know, I've learned to appreciate just you know, folk chords on a guitar, just like, you know, great voicing stuff, but you can just kind of fan it out and you start with an A or whatever, and you can, or you know, or you can put a, kind of, it's the same chord, you're just changing up the way you play it. You know, it's just kind of adding and fanning out the notes to just kind of embellish it, you know.
But you would also do this in your single note playing, where you'll play these different progressions and things like that.
And I think that just comes from like thinking about those chords, you know, and how those chords fit. You just play. You know, it's inside the chords.
Yeah.
You know, if I think about it piano wise, you know, it just opens up the kind of the way I can do the chords, kind of. You know, I can just do them different than just playing it as the guitar might stipulate. Just kind of trying to think outside the box a little bit, you know.
You also did this with the different groupings and things like that too, where you use you use odd groupings of fives, groupings of sixes, and in your linear playing. And I didn't hear a lot of people doing that when I first heard you. It was so, whoa, that's amazing. And when you hear these odd groupings where things just don't line up in the same spot, it makes the lines more interesting sounding. And is that something that you just hear it that way?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of the people that you learn from, and some people, they'll say like, oh, you have this original style, and I go, well, it's only original because it's the people I took from, you know. And it was just you know, I learned to play, like, you know, the early Clapton blues breaker, that tone, you know. I really love that tone, and of course Hendrix, and and then later on, I really got interested in Bill Connors from Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy, Chick Corea, because he started opening up into more of this kind of fusion thing, but he had that kind of Clapton tone and that kind of bluesy thing, which caught my. I had heard some fusion before that, and I thought, yeah, that's cool, but it wasn't really making me. I want to learn to play that until I heard Bill Connors, and it was like, oh, he's got a little bit of that blues in him. So I was like, I want to learn that. So I think it was a combination starting with Clapton, and then Bill Connors, and then listening to McLaughlin, and then going back and listening to all these other cats, and then you start realizing there's all this magic and everything. And so as I was trying to accumulate these different people, I knew that centrally I wanted it to have a certain tone and a certain touch, which I tried to develop. So that was kind of the thread by putting all these styles together. And that's that's about. It's not necessarily that original. It's just the matter of the people that I.
It's just those particular
from
collection of influences, though.
Exactly.
But
it's true with anybody, I guess.
It's fascinating, though, the fusion influences like that. That's really that's fascinating to hear that.
Yeah. I think that kind of opened up my ear to almost like a little wider aperture on rock music, because like when John McLaughlin came out with Birds of Fire, and I'd go see John live, and it just the freedom, and it caught my ear because especially when originally he was playing like this SG through a Marshall stick, and he had this kind of like a Clapton tone, but he was playing all these crazy licks. I thought, this is really cool. I mean, I've always had this kind of like handicap where the sound has to reach me first, and then I'll listen to what somebody has to say. Otherwise, and I don't know if it's even that crazy, because I mean, music is sound.
Music is sound.
Does it connect with you? Does the sound? And I've always loved the sound of piano and that pure tonality, and so I've always kind of chased that with electric guitar, and then like a lot of the early cats, they had such a beautiful sound,
Now you're known as kind of a perfectionist, or you had been known as a perfectionist with your tone. And
I'm in recovery now.
You're in recovery.
Yeah. I just show up and play straight through the PA now. No, I'm just kidding. No.
Okay, how important? First of all, let's talk about this. When you're playing a solo and the tone, the feedback you're getting from your amp to your hands, how important is having the right sound for you to feel like you can really play? I mean, are there some nights where your sound is so good that you just can play anything?
Yeah, no, that's really well said. It's totally true. It's for me. If it doesn't sound right, and it's almost like the sound is nice, but even more important is how does it feel?
Yeah.
How does the polarity of all the situation of events of the guitar and the amp and the acoustics feel to where it's like wind to your back, And I think the more stuff you run through, sometimes the harder it is to get that. It can wreak havoc with that. And then the electricity thing is really tough. Like if you get to a building that has a lot of dirty AC, it can really trash your sound out. And it's like
that's true.
And sometimes when I get to the gig, Dustin, the gentleman I work with, we'll go around and try different AC plugs in the building to find one and it's like, wow, that's like all of a sudden you go to like the bathroom hall, and it's like you plug in there and it's like it sounds better. And it's all these things add up. And I mean, if you were to like pinpoint one, you go, well, that's silly, it's kind of obsessive, and I agree. But it's you getting 3% here, 3% there. All of a sudden, you make 4 changes and your tone's 30% better.
Yeah.
But the point is, I think, how can you construct something that's repeatable and not so complicated that it's impossible, But it is important to me to make it feel right and make me want to play.
One of your solo sounds has a violin tone to it.
Right.
And it has a very dark sound. It's a beautiful, beautiful. What led your ear to that sound? And can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, honestly, I think you just listening to early Clapton records. I mean, they just had that kind of sound, where you just. those records to add that fusion aspect, and like the more gain you add, the more ratty it gets sometimes. So I think I have a tendency to run a little. I wish I ran a little more treble in my lead, but the treble just gets so trashy sounding.
Right.
And I would love to have an amp that had like a ton of gain and real pure harmonics, and I could add treble and it would be pure sounding. That would be great. But I think I have a tendency to err on the side of less treble, and then sometimes if I get it more bassy sounding, and then like in the studio or out at the mixing board live, we add certain frequencies that you can get away with that won't add the trash as much. But
yeah, the trash it's hard to that when you hear that hashy sound like that, that gets fatiguing.
Yeah.
Probably to it's like when you're hearing it yourself with playing it, where you just it's
So I try to get more of that kind of, but that's just a sound that I kind of like for a lead. But then there's an alternative sound that I'll use where like more of the Hendrix fuzz sound, which I like that too. But that's kind of a different approach. So and I never could decide which one I liked better. So I started using a multiple amp setup. One of them has more of the Hendrix tone with the fuzzy sound, and one has more of that smoother violin tone with.
And how has your setup changed over the years?
It really hasn't changed that much. I mean, I will just use different Fender amps for rhythm, and I'll use different amps for a dirty rhythm sound, and then I use different Marshalls for a lead tone. But it's kind of stayed. The concept stayed the same because I've never been able to find an amp that could do all the sounds that I wanted, which would really be great.
Yeah.
I'd love to just have one amp, but it's hard to do.
Well, your rhythm tones and your lead tones are so different from one another that it requires you to have
kind of does, yeah,
very different amplifiers really for that.
Yeah.
You play Fender style guitars. Sometimes you run into things where you get hum.
Yeah.
We were talking about this earlier that does that ever drive you nuts?
It doesn't bother me unless it gets ridiculous. And I mean, I have played some gigs where the hum was louder than the note from the single coils, and I've ended up playing the night on a humbucking guitar. I've been trying to find some hum canceling pickups that sound more like single coils, which is tough to find.
It's hard.
So usually I'm kind of amazed at how much I've gotten to where I've just blocked it out. I guess it's like somebody that has to sleep next to a subway. They just get used to it and they go, I don't hear it anymore or something. But sometimes it's manageable, but every once in a while it can be a real problem. Yeah.
So what in your career have you not done that you want to do?
I really want to try to. I have some ideas for guitar playing and sound in my head that I really want to try to achieve, and I think sometimes I'm trying to fight a briar patch of how to get the guitar to have a certain sound so that it can help facilitate opening up some of these new places I want to go on guitar, style-wise and sound-wise. So I'm searching for that right now to try to come up with something where you really you feel a real push to try to be a little more unique and come up with something different. Because the guitar thing, it's been done, for 50, 60 years now, over and over and over, and there's so many beautiful players. And I think what really, not just because it catches your eye, but it's an emotionally contributive thing to try to come up with something a little unique where you can I don't know, it kind of bathes yourself in this kind of psychic nutrition or something. You hear it. It's like when we first heard the great players we love. It's like going to see a great movie that has just a little different slant on it. It's like, wow, I just felt like I got a little wider. I just grew. I just lived two more lifetimes of experience from this thing, and to me that's such a worthwhile thing. So I'm searching for that, and it's going to require me to kind of become a little bit more less solidified, more liquid, and try to open up and kind of try to go somewhere you haven't been.
Have you ever been on stage and you're playing and then you say to yourself, what year is this?
Well, you don't know where you are.
You don't know where you are, and you're
so
really
lost.
Where am I? And you're just playing.
Just playing. Yeah, or you just kind of forget the moment. Yeah, those are awesome moments. I like that. Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I think the more, it's a really, you've got a really great sound when you forget about your gear and you're just playing. And if you get so into it that you're not even sure of where you are, you're just like, you become the instrument. That's really, I think, the ultimate place to be creatively.
Where do you see the music business or the guitar, the role of guitar in society in the future? Since there's not a lot of guitar bands that are out in current bands, what are your feelings on that right now?
I think it's become more of a household thing. Like if you go to the huge music stores, they're selling more guitars than ever.
That's right.
Which is kind of interesting because guitar's not quite as popular in the sense, but I think it's shifted into where just all households have guitar for fun. It's become like an appliance of the house or something. But then I guess as far as the centerpiece of pop music, it's not so much that anymore because, I think a lot of it has to do with that somebody needs to come along to kind of break all the rule books, and do something different with it. But it happened with the saxophone too. The saxophone got less popular in the '60s compared to the '40s and '50s, and so I guess it follows the same way with the guitar. But I think it'll always have a lot of potential, and for people to look at it and come up with something unique. If for no other reason, there's only a few instruments that can play chords and single notes.
Right.
And guitar is one of them, piano, and so that puts it in a special place to where I think it has a potential to stick around for a long time and have great artists come and like reinvent the wheel.
If you had to name one solo that you learned as a kid that changed your playing or was the most influential thing that you learned, what would it be?
Wow. I remember one of the first things I learned, New York City Blues by the Yardbirds.
Mm-hmm.
I remember learning that. And when I was learning it, I was so young, I couldn't understand what Jeff Beck was doing.
I still can't.
And then learning the Nazar Blue.
Uh-huh.
That song, and that I when you're talking about going back really early where it really kind of shifted my thought process, I'd say it'd be those songs, Nazar Blue, happening 10 years time ago, which if you listen to them now, the guitar, it doesn't really even sound like guitar. It almost sounds like a sax or a violin.
Yeah.
And that really that really intrigued me, because it was guitar, but it kind of was it was like was a little bit beyond guitar. It was like it morphed into this other thing. That solo on happening 10 years time ago is so beautiful. The tone, that was like wow, and that got me into wanting to really look at it in a little more serious way.
Are there other instrumentalists, players on other instruments that were really influential to you other than guitar? Any piano players, any sax players, any?
Paul Desmond I loved his sound. And Bill Evans, piano player.
Yeah.
Keith Jarrett, Joe Zawinul, Herbie Hancock. I mean, to me, he's like the modern day Mozart.
Yeah.
I mean, you listen to the chord voicings he comes up with, and there's nobody that does voicings like he did. And he played on the West records when he was really young. And Wes Montgomery, listen to those cats. That I love that.
Talk about Wes.
He had such a great sound. So immediately anything he played was pleasing, but then his sense of soloing was just so. It just sounded so natural and effortless.
Right.
And so organic, and it's interesting because it's like that people say, oh, well, this person knows a lot of theory and this person might not, but it's like, well, Wes knew a lot of theory, but he just didn't know it from a scholastic way. He knew it from the ear training.
Yeah.
And you can hear that in his playing. So I think as he developed it, it had a little different. It wasn't regimented to what he read in a book. It was inspired by what he knew from his ear, and that's really good that we have certain people like that, and he had just it just everything he played, just it was so natural, and just like he could play any time. He didn't have to like think about it. It's like it's like, oh, you want to record a record right now? Okay, just set up, we'll do it right now. I don't need to work, and it just had a real humanity to his playing. He was my favorite. He is my favorite jazz guitarist. Although there's other cats I love too, but his sound, he'd just do one note, and it was like the start of Round Midnight, just doing a dum dum boom da 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 da. So okay, I'm done. I'm totally in this. It's like a great movie that the first 2 minutes, it just you're in the movie. It just gets you because it's so strong and has so much gravity to it. And I live for those moments in art. Whether it's paintings or music or whatever. It's just because it's so inspiring. And it kind of like. It kind of recalibrates the soul, and it really gives. It's such a benchmark for what we can try to achieve or what we can try to go for, And it's like the other day I was a couple of times I was listening to the radio, and all of a sudden Manic Depression came on by Hendrix. I thought, man, that sounds fresher to me. I mean, maybe just because I'm older, but. There was a certain organicness about the guitar. I remember another day that I was listening to pop radio, and Eleanor Rigby came on. I went, well, with a benchmark like that, it's like all of a sudden it's kind of, you just realize the stratosphere where you can, kind of be, and so to me it's inspiring. Yeah.
What do you think about the lack of sophistication in contemporary music versus music of the 60s and 70s? Pop music in the 60s and 70s was far more complex from a chord progression point of view, melodies, things like that, than anything you'd hear on the radio today.
Well, I think a couple of things about that. I think, just my opinion, like some of the pop music, well, the function of it to me has changed. It's not the same function of when I would sit down and listen to a new Hendrix record when I was a kid. It was like to be entranced and, get chills and stuff. And I don't know if I think the function of music is more just to make you, jive with it physically with, like dance music. It pretty much has to, I think it's more, it has to be in a dance platform, whether you're dancing or not, but it's got that kind of body movement thing. But, you listen to some of the dance music, and to me, every once in a while you hear some pretty cool chord progressions or some chord voicings. You tell these are really accomplished musicians that are doing it. I'm like, to me personally, I'm listening to it going, you know what, this would be great if A, they wouldn't use so much freaking auto-tune, and B, why is it, this is a real beef with me. It's like you listen to all the old stuff and you have drummers that came from the 30s and 40s that had a swing to their playing. And all the early rock had drummers that had a swing to their playing. And I even told Mitch Mitchell this. I had the honor of like playing a little bit with Mitch Mitchell, and I said, you were as important as Hendrix's guitar because you swung his guitar, and it was so beautiful. And you wrote these parts, like Ringo wrote these parts that were amazing. But point being, I don't think it's ultimately in our best to dumb down the drums to where we're just dun dun dun, with a beatbox with the bass drum. Personally, it's like, why not let these swing drummers be a part of this new pop music that still is doing some pretty hip stuff? And I was like listening to some of this dance music on the radio, and I thought, you know what? If you didn't have to auto-tune all this, and you put a swing drummer with this would be a really cool track. And that's all you'd have to do, but then maybe it wouldn't serve the function that music does now, which is more. But people,
maybe it would serve it better.
I think it would. Well, I would. It's artistically or musically, I think it would. But that is I would have to ask myself the question: is the function of music the same? Is the function of music's changed so much that we're not looking to sit down and go into another place where we're getting chills and thinking about our dreams or we want music that we can just listen to in the background while we work on computers and kind of tap our foot. Maybe the function has changed for some people. So maybe it's a moot point. But to me, I'd love to hear. I think it's kind of it's a bit of a tragedy that I think the drummers have gotten the worst deal out of this, because you've had these beautiful drummers that could be a part of pop music playing. a song, Motown song comes on, and it's like, oh my, listen to that. It's just got a thing, And
absolutely.
And if somebody wanted to argue with me about it, or to point a different point, I would say, well, then why is it so many kids love that stuff? Why is so much of that music instilled in modern day movies?
Right.
Obviously, there's some magic there.
Yeah.
That and as you go through life, you always have these moments that were too valuable to forget. Like when I started, I did an Avia Musicom tour, and I had to relearn a lot of that songs. And I went, you know what? There are certain things I did then that are too valuable for me not to do anymore. So bring that library book and put it into the present. And there's some, as we find these jewels in the chapters of our lives, and we have to decide what's not that important and what is a jewel, and keep those for the. You know what I mean? And I think the jewel of the beautiful drummers from the 40s and 50s that in the 60s, and the Hal Blaine stuff from the Wrecking Crew, that's too valuable a jewel to leave in the past in pop music. That's my feeling.
You were just talking about going back and listening to some of your old records. Do you hear things that you say, oh man, why don't I play that? Incorporate
Absolutely.
that into your playing again.
Yeah.
What, for example, what is something that is it? Would it be stylistic things or types of lines? What do you hear?
With me, it was more the sound I was getting,
Mm-hmm.
And as I find, honestly, using newer speakers or newer tubes and a lot of the newer gear. It's going in a direction that isn't quite as easy for me to get the sound I used to get.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes more of a challenge.
But you do use a lot of, on your pedal board, I've seen it, you use a lot of old pedal
stuff.
None of the stuff is made anymore.
No, it really, every month something gets quit making where it's, it's not.
Do you hunt around and find extra ones that...
Sometimes, yeah. The tube thing is interesting. It's like for example, the tube overdrive I use, it works great on a certain tube, but they don't make that tube anymore.
Right.
So it's really tough to keep that sound the same. And the tubes that I used to love to use in my Marshall amps, they don't make those anymore. So it's like, well, we make this now, and I was like, and I could go, well, that's not good. It's like, well, maybe it is good in some other situation with another amp, but for the sound I'm going for, it isn't quite as good. So it's a little bit more of a chore to get it, but I think just some of the sounds that was the main thing that I and I think just the not thinking about playing when you're playing, do as much thinking and practicing as you can when you're practicing, but when you start playing, don't bring that into the arena, don't think about it as much, and so that was I think that I've learned a little bit more about music, and interestingly now that's good. It's helped me in my writing, but it also makes me more aware of myself when I'm just playing. So there's two sides to everything, You kind of have to check and balance what works and what doesn't. But I think in the past it was a little easier to get a certain sound that I wanted, and then I think I didn't have a clue what I was doing. So there was a certain reckless abandon to it, And then now I know, oh well, that's what you're doing now. So then there's a little bit more of a conservatism to it, So that's all, like trying to bust down the walls and just stay liquid, just stay open-minded, stay, I think you have to stay childlike about music, because if, and I think this will be true probably when I leave this planet, but when I think about what are my favorite times in music, I don't think about necessarily the big gig or the contracts or the success. I think about the times when I first plugged into an amp and I went, God, that's, being 15 years old and just going, God, this is fun, or being in a van and drive it all night to go play some gig for $30, because it's the simple, just that passion of just playing, and that's the highest moments you remember. And it's like when I meet people on the road and they, well, I don't play for for a living, or I'm not doing that good in my band, I said, man, that stuff doesn't matter, because if, okay, so maybe it doesn't, and someday you're going to get this huge deal, and you're going to have this, it's not going to give you anything that you don't have now,
Right.
because it's like, you might not have that, but you plug in that amp and you play, you go, God, this is elative, I love it, and that's what it's all about. And the more I stay in touch with that, I think the better music I can make, So that's to me, it's like going back and making sure you keep those jewels, and then see where, and then stay open-minded and see where it can take you somewhere fresh.
If I said to you, Eric, what is your favorite guitar solo that you played on a record? What is it?
Wow, I don't. What would that be? I don't even know. What would it be?
What is your favorite guitar sound? How's that? On a particular song.
I like the sound on Trademark, the ending solo to Trademark.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when we were mixing that, the engineer was like, you can't do that. It's too big. It's over there. It's like, yeah, but I wanted like a big cello riding over, and they had EQ'd it where it was real thin. I was like, no. And so Richard Mullen, the guy I'd worked with for all these years, he came in and re-EQ'd it the way I wanted, and the guy that was working on the radio was like, I don't know, but it worked, But I like that sound, yeah.
When you go into the control room to listen, how involved are you on mixing, on your guitar sound, all those things?
Pretty involved.
Very involved,
yeah.
right?
Because I have to kind of produce my guitar thing, And,
would you say you spend as much time here getting your sound in the room as you do in the control room also?
I'm always messing with my sound, trying to get it to work better for me. But when I'm in the studio, I don't spend as much time on my guitar sound, only because I know what amps work, I know where the mic works, and I know how to EQ it in the control room. It's become out of a process of when I used to spend a crazy amount of time, I learned kind of what works for me.
Okay, so what does work? How do you mic a guitar? What do you typically use on your guitar amp?
Well, what usually works for me is I'll use, it depends. If I'm doing a clean tone, I'll probably use like some really nice condenser mics that are like half on the cone and half on the dust cover.
Yep.
I'll run them through a couple of APIs usually, and I'll usually try to take a little 2.8 or 3K out, because Fender amps always have this peakiness. If you try to dial it out of the amp, you lose the energy of the amp.
That's right.
But if you go in the studio, you can kind of just like
notch
surgically
it
a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then I might replace it with an 8 or 9 or 10K just to give it a little sheen on the top, or make up for whatever wiring lost end I have from. And then I'll run it through like a compressor, a little bit, just to compress it a little bit. Sometimes I'll add 100 cycles if it's on the bridge pickup and it's a little thin. And then I put it in stereo. And usually don't use the stereo the reverb on the amp. I'll use 2 amps that way, and then I'll use like a stereo reverb. For the Marshall, I'll use like an old 57.
Okay.
Kind of like in the bottom right quadrant of the speaker, about maybe 4 or 5 inches out, at a little bit of an angle. Then I'll use like a room mic, like a Neumann or something. And,
just to give it some air.
Yeah, and then I'll run that through. I'll run it through like a Neve, and then sometimes a room mic through an API. But also, this when I recorded on View Musicom, we used a Ramsa channel, which is this old funk ball thing made by Panasonic, but they sound great on a distortion guitar. Yeah. And I get kidded about that all the time, ridiculed, like, why are you using that thing? I said, well, it works, That there's the EQ on it's kind of like the tone circuit on a Marshall or something, and you can actually turn some of the EQ up, and it gives you even more gain. So I mean, all the lead guitar on Avi Musicom was cut on a Ramsa, which. I'm gonna go buy those up real quick.
Yeah, after this comes out, you can't.
It's interesting, sometimes the funky stuff. It's just like with guitar pedals, and the same thing in the studio. Sometimes the funkier stuff really gives you a better sound, you know.
Is there anything that you never get asked in interviews that you say, man, I wish somebody would ask me this?
Wow. About my film career. Nobody ever asked me about my film career.
Talk about your film career.
I don't really have one. About my shining film career, my potential blossoming in the lights, screen lights. No, or my golf game. They never asked me about.
Do you play golf?
No, I don't. That's probably what nobody asked me. I did one time. I said, "How hard can this be?" So
it's very hard.
I went with a friend and said, "That can't be that hard." And I thought I'd like to learn to do this. So I took one lesson and I was like, "Man." I was humbled very quickly. I said, "I'm going to stick with guitar."
Yeah.
So now when I do interviews and everybody asks me, I'm a one-trick pony, and they say, "What do you do when you're not playing music and touring?" I say, "Well, I like to play guitar. That's what I do for a hobby." But,
I wanted to ask you this too, because I ask everybody that interview, how do you pick up the guitar every day?
Pretty much, yeah. If sometimes on the road we'll have a day off and I won't play it at all because my hands are sore or blisters or whatever, and I just want to give myself a break. But sometimes and every once in a while I'll go a few days not playing, and it's always you probably know, you don't play for a while and you have this fresh approach to it, which is really beneficial.
Yeah.
But then when I try to do certain licks, I can't. I have certain guitar licks I have to practice pretty much before I go on stage and stuff. And I still can't play them as good as the 12-year-olds on YouTube. They play myself better than I do. I watch them. I'm just going to hire them to come out and play Cliffs of Dover at the end of the night. It's like, where are these people coming from? Are they even from Earth? I think they beamed down. But no, it's great. I mean, but it's just like sports. Everybody's getting better and better at stuff, But, yeah.
Well, Eric, I really appreciate you hanging out today. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
To speak with you.
I love what you do. It's great, man.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's all for now. Please subscribe here to my Everything Music YouTube channel. If you're a first-time viewer, don't forget to ring the bell. If you're interested in the Beato book, go to my website at www.rickbeato.com. You can find it there. That's how I support the channel. Buy a t-shirt, buy a mug. Follow me on Instagram at rickbeato1. The new Beato ear training program is out. Go to beatoeartraining.com and check out the introduction video. And don't forget, if you want to support the channel even more, think about becoming a member of the Beato Club. Thanks for watching.